All right, big time Sunday night game between Notre Dame and Miami. Number 6 Notre Dame at number 10 Miami. Sunday night game, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. The storyline to know, for me at least, can Notre Dame survive its first 2 games with a brand new starting quarterback? They made the national title game last year before losing to Ohio State. They have hopes of another deep playoff run this year. Last year's team, mentioned time and time again, relied on an elite run game and elite coverage unit. Both those should remain really good in 2025 with Jeremiah Love back, Leonard Moore back, a great secondary returning as well. But they will have a brand new quarterback in C.J. Carr, the redshirt freshman, who was the number 6 quarterback recruit in the 2024 high school class, has only taken 4 snaps in his career so far. He'll need to get up to speed quickly, though, because they play a top 10 team on the road in Miami, then a bye week, and then they got number 19, Texas A&M. If Notre Dame loses one of those games, their backs are against the wall the rest of the year. They probably have to win the next 10 games to make the playoff. If they lose both those games, all of a sudden Notre Dame might be out of the playoff race in early September, considering how relatively easy their schedule is the rest of the year. If they win both these games, Dalton, all of a sudden Notre Dame is set up beautifully for the rest of the season.
Well, if they win both of these games, you feel like they can win the rest. They might be, you could have them, and this year they can get a bye. They can be in the top 4. They win both of these games, feel good about them running the table, maybe being the number 1 team at the end of it, right? And I think they do have, I don't want to say the luxury, but they do have the breathing room where I think if they went 1-1, it would look a lot like last year where they lost to NIU, and that was a lot worse loss than either Miami or Texas A&M, where you'd go, okay, an 11-1 Notre Dame team in any fashion.
They'll get in 11-1.
It's going to get in. I don't know if they'll be top 4, maybe. Depends which game they lose, all that stuff. This is huge also for Miami. I mean, this is obviously a top 10 matchup, but if you talk about Miami, we think Clemson's the prohibitive favorite in the ACC. If we're talking about now Miami thinking they'll be an at-large team if they don't win the ACC, this is the biggest game now in their schedule, right? And you talk about, okay, they win this game, we start just thinking about Miami a little bit differently with Carson Beck, and obviously everything that happened last year, and the team probably should have made the playoff, but Syracuse had to go and ruin that, of course. So, I mean, I think this is, you talk about week 1 playoff implications for 2 teams that we think are going to be looking at as at-large possibilities. You have Miami in the playoff, don't you?
Yeah, I just realized, by the way, these 3 top 10 games we have, all 6 teams are in my playoff. So in my opinion, these are 3 games between playoff teams this year.
Oof,
You didn't have Miami.
I have 4 of them. I don't have LSU either.
Yeah.
And we'll be talking about the next game, obviously, with Notre Dame and A&M. I have A&M as my 4th SEC team. So, I mean, but you talk about those, man, gutsy, taking all 6 of them.
All 6, I just realized
all 6 of them playing each other in week 1. Man, it's a gutsy bracket right there. I don't even know who you'd be rooting for at this point. Can't root for everybody.
Syracuse.
Well, that's a good call, too. Yeah. Oh, well, if they pull off that upset, then we're talking differently about Cuse, too, maybe. Steve Angeli going to break Kyle McCord's records. Anyway, huge game for both teams. Major playoff implications. Both teams with new quarterbacks. Whole lot of wild stories down in Miami this week.
Yeah. I just want to mention, too, because Notre Dame's schedule, I mentioned, was relatively easy. The only other currently ranked team on their schedule is number 25, Boise State.
Yep.
That's it. So there is games against USC. Maybe USC gets a lot better this year, too. And, of course, Syracuse Orange later on. We'll see. But Notre Dame's schedule, 10-2, might be enough to get in, but it's dicey.
It would depend what that 10-2 looks like. And even then, what if it's 0-2 and then 10? And maybe there's a chance you didn't beat a ranked team all year.
Right.
That's Notre Dame, I think it's an underrated storyline. They need at least one of these first 2 games.
Yeah, I agree with that.
This is massive. Especially Miami has time to make it up, and they could win a conference in theory. Notre Dame doesn't have that luxury.
Right. So you have the Miami offense with a brand new quarterback in Carson Beck, replacing the number 1 overall pick in Cam Ward. But Carson Beck, at least in our opinion, is probably the best you could do in the portal to replace him.
Sure. And I think the challenge in this game is he's going to a team that, look, not only did they lose their Heisman finalist quarterback, Cam Ward, they did replace him with Beck, which is a great replacement. But they lost their top 6 leaders in receiving yards last year. You talk about Xavier Restrepo, Elijah Arroyo, Jacoby George, Isaiah Hortons at Alabama. I mean, this is a whole new receiving core, too, with not a single player that had 500 yards last season. The most notable player, LSU transfer C.J. Daniels, who had a great 2023 at Liberty, but dealt with some injuries and some struggles last year at LSU. I don't know. I mean, you have C.J. Daniels. You have Keelan Marion from BYU, who's known more as a kick returner. Maybe there's some young kids, obviously, in that Miami receiving room that they're expecting to help them early. But this is a problem when you're playing the single best man coverage team in the country with Leonard Moore and Christian Gray in this secondary at Notre Dame. It was a huge reason that they made the national title game last year, is because they were so good in the secondary, and there were so many weeks, even in the playoff, as you well know, when opponents' receivers were just completely outmatched by this secondary, right? Penn State, Georgia, Indiana. When Notre Dame locks you up man-to-man with Leonard Moore and those guys, it's over. You better find a way to run the football or find something else to do, because first in coverage grade, second highest rate of man coverage in the country, I believe, behind Purdue, third best EPA per play allowed, most interceptions. They're lights out. They're lights out. Now, we'll see if Chris Ash comes in and runs this secondary, this defense, the same way Al Golden did. But if I'm looking at the tape, I go, I wouldn't change a darn thing. I got the same, especially with Moore and Gray on the outside, and against this team with so many inexperienced and receivers and receivers with such light production last year. I'm getting after it if I'm Notre Dame. If I'm the Fighting Irish in the secondary, I'm attacking. And Carson Beck last year, up and down, but against the teams that played really good man-to-man coverage last year, when you talk about Ole Miss, you talk about Alabama, Texas did a little bit against Georgia last year. It was a struggle with Georgia's receivers, too. It's something we talked about a lot last year. Carson Beck against man coverage last year completed less than 55% of his passes. There's going to be tight windows in this game. And Miami's run game is not particularly creative. They got a good offensive line with Mauanoa and those guys up front, we know. But I think if Carson Beck, the more he has to drop back and throw the football, if Notre Dame is going to go with the same mentality of, hey, we're getting in press cover one, and we're going to lock you up, and you go ahead and try to make those throws, I don't love that matchup. Not just for Carson Beck, but really for the entire passing game. I don't love it for most teams, if I'm being honest, but especially for a team that doesn't return really any of its receiving production from last year. Some guys in the NFL, some guys transferred, all of that. I'm a little worried about it. Because if it's me, it's another one. I better have some balance. You walk into this game one-dimensional, and if you drop back and throw the football on Notre Dame, you're in for a long night.
Yeah.
And that's even with Carson Beck or whoever it is at quarterback, any team that's playing against them. We're going to talk about that a lot all year, but I'm not sitting there trying to challenge Leonard Moore and Christian Gray on the outside too much.
And we saw Carson Beck in 2023 play like a top 5 quarterback in the country with elite weapons. Last year, without elite weapons at Georgia, he had some issues last year.
Brock Bowers ain't walking through that door.
Yeah, Ladd McConkey ain't walking through the door either, and he had struggles last year at Georgia. At Miami, there's question marks with the weaponry again. And against a team like Notre Dame, like you just mentioned before, I mean, they held Penn State to 0 catches for -1 yard against the receivers. So I do have question marks, too, with Carson Beck.
And another bit, when you're playing a team with such heavy man-to-man coverage, right? So often one of your biggest assets, if you have a Lenora Sellers, a Devin Dampier, anybody who can, even an Arch Manning, somebody who can run the football, that usually is a problem for teams that run a lot of man coverage, because you either have to leave a spy or everybody's back's turned in man coverage. Carson Beck ain't running with the football anywhere. He's going to have to beat it with his arm because he's a statue. That's what he does. So I think there are some real problems matchup-wise to me with the Notre Dame secondary possibly having a big advantage over Miami's wide receivers and eventually Carson Beck if nobody can get open.
My matchup on the other side is Notre Dame's offensive line against Miami's defensive line. This should be a war in the trenches. Notre Dame, a top 10 offensive line in the country for me entering the year. Very exciting tackle duo in Emil Wagner and Anthony Knapp. Wagner, my number 5 tackle in the country, finished his junior year as the 3rd most valuable tackle in the Power 4, according to our wins above average metric. Anthony Knapp started 15 games at left tackle last year as a true freshman. 69.2 run blocking grade. Billy Schrouth is a returning starter at left guard. Only allowed 1 combined sack or hit on 363 pass blocking snaps in 2024. Now, they will be without a potential star at guard in Charles Jagusa. He suffered a broken arm in July, unfortunately. He should be one of the best interior offensive linemen in the country when healthy. He will probably not be playing in this game, though, against Miami. Miami, meanwhile, has a top 10 defensive line in college football. Reuben Bain Jr. is back for another year, one of the best edge rushers in the country, top 5 edge in the country, in my opinion, and a projected top 15 pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. He is third among returning power forward edge rushers with 73 pressures over the last 2 years. 17% pass rush win rate is fourth in that group. Akeem Mesidor is back for another year. A couple former 5-star recruits at D tackle they have as well, and edge rusher. Notre Dame's offense is built around the run game with the best running back in the country in Jeremiah Love. But even he cannot shine unless the offensive line creates holes for him. And like I mentioned before, you have a brand new quarterback and a redshirt freshman in CJ Carr. You want, in a really tough road environment too in Miami, you want to make him as comfortable as possible. That won't happen if he's under pressure all game in this one too. So I really think this really comes down to, can Notre Dame's offensive line, one, create holes for Jeremiah Love and all the other running backs to run through, and two, keep CJ Carr upright in this game?
Yeah, no, I think Carr's composure in this game is going to be a massive X factor, especially if Bain and those guys up front can get pressure. And obviously Notre Dame is going to try not to ask him to just drop back and throw the football too much. Now, last year they had a veteran quarterback, but it feels like a similar vibe to me to when we walked in as Week 1 preview last year. Notre Dame was going to Texas A&M, and it was Riley Leonard's first game as quarterback. Now, again, Leonard had the starting experience, obviously, at Duke, so that's a different thing than a redshirt freshman. But a lot of pressure, really good defense he's playing, and we knew even then, even with a veteran in Riley Leonard, look, they don't want to drop back and throw the football too much. They want to run the ball. Now, Carr can't run like Leonard, but from what I've seen in the spring game and reports that he likes to push the ball down the field, I like the potential. I actually quietly like the potential of this Notre Dame passing game. You talk about guys like Jaden Greathouse, Malachi Fields, the Virginia transfer, Will Pauling, the Wisconsin transfer, a lot of people like Eli Raridan. Notre Dame's always got a good tight end in the system, right? So I think you're talking about a passing game with potential. But this is the game where you really need to pass protect and make sure Carr keeps his composure and you protect him even with the play calling as much as possible. A fascinating dynamic on this side of the ball. If Miami's defensive line can take the game over, you got a different ball game.
Absolutely. Yeah, you just look at it right there. I mean, Miami's secondary last year was the Achilles heel of that entire team last year. They did improve it, I think, in the portal, adding a couple really good players too, but that's the question mark is, okay, if you do give him time back there with a really good receiving core, they could take advantage of Miami's secondary, but Miami's defensive line, I think, will be critical in Miami winning this game today. Or this week, I should say.
I think what they're going to do is ask Carr. You're going to get he's going to have to make 4 or 5 big boy throws. It's 3rd and 7 or maybe a deep shot that you just don't want to miss. I think that's what it's going to be. And I mean, that's usually Notre Dame's blueprint lately anyway. Run the football, play defense, make enough throws when we need you to. So I think this supporting the environment is there for him to succeed. And we may still see some Kenny Minchie when they want to add to the run game because he's a little more athletic. It would not shock me at all if we saw some option looks with Kenny Minchie, and we saw a little bit of both of these guys as well. But that's really the big question with Notre Dame. Like so many teams up near the top of these rankings, quarterback. What are we getting out of him? It's fascinating for this to be his first start because this is such a good opponent, too.
In the final top 10 game that we're previewing today, the third and final one between Notre Dame and Miami, who will win in South Beach?
I think the theme, especially last year with this Notre Dame team, was their identity. The identity that Marcus Freeman's built with his defense, with the coverage unit, with the running backs. I mean, Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, Aeneas Williams. It doesn't get much better than a triple threat like that, right? I think they have the right environment for CJ Carr to succeed in early. And when I say succeed, I don't mean go out there and tear it up and throw for 350. I mean just get out there and find a way to win ball games, especially these first two. Get through one, if not both of these first two. You got an inside track. I like Notre Dame's identity in this game. I love their secondary against maybe not shaky. We haven't seen it yet, but what could be a shaky wide receiving core from Miami. I don't know that Beck has a whole lot of answers other than that. I don't know that Mark Fletcher might need a big game on the ground if they're going to win this. I just like Notre Dame's identity, especially on defense in this game and their ability. Look, they're used to playing these physical running the football games, right? Georgia, Penn State, Ohio State, even Indiana last year, right? Good defensive lines, good run defense. They're used to that. They believe they can run right through that, especially with Jeremiah Love. I think it's a similar vibe to what we saw when Notre Dame played A&M last year. Notre Dame 23, Miami 16, low-scoring game.
So in these top 10 games, I agreed with you that I took Texas over Ohio State and Clemson over LSU. I have Miami win this one. I have 24-23 Miami. I really think it's a coin flip between these two right here. I just think I know more about Carson Beck and what to expect from him. I know it's not a great matchup for him against Notre Dame, but Notre Dame's quarterback battle really went down to the wire between CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey. I really think it came really close to picking Kenny Minchey outright to win that job. So I'm going to take Miami to win at home and what should be a really, really close game. I just think Carson Beck, I trust him a little bit more than CJ Carr, and I think Miami's defensive line will do enough against Jeremiah Love and enough to get pressure on CJ Carr too. Again, this is out of all 11 of these games, this was by far for me the hardest one to pick, but I have Miami winning by 1 point. I can see going to overtime too. It should be, in my opinion, might be the best game of the entire week one.
I think this is going to be a much more defensive game than we think. And one of the reasons that Carr was still in that battle with Minchey, there was reports that he's the one who likes to push the ball downfield even into tight windows and take some risky throws. And we've seen Beck do that as well when windows get tight. Might come down to which of these quarterbacks can keep the composure and not turn the football over. Because a turnover in this game that I do think is going to be a relatively low-scoring game, that could flip. The field position is going to be big. I just think in these types of ugly games, and I think it'll be ugly, Notre Dame's identity is that. They love playing in those games. We've seen it for multiple years now. We saw it last year, even games in the playoff, like the Penn State game.
Yeah.
A lot of that game was ugly, right? It was 10-3 at halftime. The Georgia game, even though it was Gunnar Stockton playing, it was an ugly, hard-fought defensive game. I just think Notre Dame's more used to that than Miami is. And Miami, look, they had arguably the best offense in the country last year. Carson Beck is good. They're not going to be the best offense in the country. And you better be elite offensively if you're going to score on Notre Dame.
Yeah. All right. So Dalton and I disagree. Dalton's got Notre Dame winning. I got Miami winning.